What if I told you that Mew isn't just one Pokemon, but the template Pokemon? Hello, and welcome to the world of Pokemon. This is Pokeshame from Straight Out of Kanto, the first ever mythical Pokemon, and number 151 on the Pokedex, Mew. The biggest mystery in Generation 1 with red and blue, and still to this day has many mysteries surrounding its core being. The original, genetic blueprint, and potentially one of the only Pokemon that should be capable of every major transformation we've ever seen. What is the genetic blueprint for all Pokemon hiding that we haven't seen yet? Mega Evolution, Gigantamax, Terastalization, and even paradox forms. And what about a shadow form? Today, we're diving into why Mew, being the ancestor of all Pokemon, not creator, logically implies something far bigger than we've ever been shown. And friends, if you enjoy deep dive Pokemon lore videos like this, and you want Pokemon lore to be taken seriously, if that's you, subscribe, leave a comment with your take on Mew, and it would really support the channel if you drop a like on the video if this video got you thinking, and it would tell YouTube you want more of these deep dive Pokemon lore videos. Thank you for your support. Canonically, Mew is described as the ancestor of all Pokemon. Its DNA is said to contain the genetic information of every Pokemon species. That's not metaphorical language, guys, that's biological. This is why Mew can learn almost every move in the game, why it can adapt to nearly any situation, why cloning it produced Mewtwo, a being whose raw potential rivals gods. But here's the key idea. If all Pokemon transformations emerge from genetic potential, and Mew contains all Pokemon genetic data, then Mew should, in theory, be capable of every transformation mechanic introduced across generations. But in the context of this video, whilst not as powerful as Mewtwo, Ditto's transform ability that Mew has as well should be taken very seriously. So let's start in chronological order of transformations introduced into the Pokemon series. First, Mega Evolution. Mega Evolution is described as forcing a Pokemon's latent power beyond its natural limits, its genetic stress. Evolution accelerated through resonance. We've already seen that Mewtwo can Mega Evolve twice, both with unique traits and both with different designs. And Mewtwo is simply a modified offshoot of the original Mew. So if Mega Evolution is about unlocking dormant genetic pathways, then Mew, the source of all genetic pathways, shouldn't just Mega Evolve, it should have the purest Mega form of all. If that doesn't get the creative juices swimming, I don't know what will. A Mega Mew wouldn't be a mutation, it would be Mew becoming more itself. It's Mew stabilizing its full genetic potential. Where Mega Evolution pushes most Pokemon beyond safety, as we saw in Pokemon X and Y, Mega Mew is perfectly compatible with the process. Now guys, if you have any ideas for the design of Mega Mew X and Y and what abilities and type it would be, let me know down in the comment section. Gigantamax isn't just about size, it's about primal expression. Gigantamax Pokemon often resemble ancient exaggerated versions of themselves, like their concept taken to some sort of mythical scale. If Mew carries ancestral memory within its DNA, then Gigantamax fits it perfectly. A Gigantamax Mew wouldn't just grow larger, it would represent life itself at a cosmic scale. The idea of Pokemon from before refinement, the ancestor remembered as a god. Just think of some of the colossal Gigantamax forms we see in Pokemon Sword and Shield, the likes of Gigantamax Snorlax, Gigantamax Gengar, and Gigantamax Charizard. But maybe Mew would have more of an ability like Eternatus, where we get Eternatus's Eternamax form, or maybe something quite godlike like Urshifu's Gigantamax form. Gigantamax Mew represents life before form. This is Mew as myth, not organism. Let me know your thoughts on how you would design that down in the comment section. Now what if I told you this next one might be the most interesting type of transformation for Mew we could get? From Gen 9, Scarlet and Violet, Terastalization. Terastalization is all about type flexibility. Pokemon temporarily rewrite their battle identity to survive. Mew is already famous for this. Its move pool covers almost every type. So really, Terastalization isn't a stretch, it's an extension. But perhaps Mew extends that himself. In fact, if Terastalization reflects environmental adaptation, then Mew should be the most compatible Pokemon with it, including Terapagos. You could argue that Mew wouldn't just terrestrialize into one type, it could potentially shift freely because it already contains all type data internally. Where other Pokemon borrow a type temporarily, Mew rewrites itself. It doesn't adapt to the environment adapts around Mew. Of course, you could always bring Terapagos into the conversation here, and you could always bring that old chestnut back about who came first between Mew and Terapagos. But the best way to look at it is if Terapagos is the source of terrestrialization, but terrestrialized Mew would be the Pokemon most perfectly adapted to it. Not the engine like Terapagos, but actually the ultimate expression. What if Mew, when undergoing terrestrialization, could change its type from Psychic to Electric type, but then have the ability to change again mid-battle to another type? You could argue a little bit similar to Arceus and Arceus' plates, but Mew would be able to do it freely, mid-battle, whereas Arceus, you basically have to select the plate for him. It will be a very interesting battle dynamic in Pokemon battling. Now, these transformations so far are responsive transformations. One needs a Mega Stone, one needs Galar Energy, and one needs to potentially be near Terapagos. But if Mew possesses the genetic ability to transform into all three, would he necessarily need all of these to be able to do so? Or perhaps he could even transform into a Pokemon that represents all three of these at the same time. Now the next one isn't a response form, it's actually a paradox form, once again introduced in Gen 9. However, you could argue that this wouldn't necessarily be Mew anymore if we got the origin form of Mew and a future version of Mew. Now, we've had ancient primal forms before, especially with Kyogre and Groudon, and origin forms before with Giratina, Dialga and Palkia. So it does make you wonder, does Mew have those himself? But then also with paradox forms, you get those ancient primal forms, but you get hyper evolved future forms, as we see with Cyclizar when he becomes Miraidon that we see in Pokemon Violet. Of course, in the past it used to be Koraidon in Pokemon Scarlet, and we see a whole evolutionary line from there on forth. Does Mew have a similar timeline? But here's the big thing. If Mew is the origin point, then every paradox Pokemon traces back to Mew, which raises a wild possibility. Mew itself should have paradox forms. A past Mew, closer to that raw primordial life, and a future Mew, hyper optimized and stripped of inefficiency. Not copies, not descendants, but alternate expressions of the same ancestor viewed through time. Now, we did do a video recently about how Mewtwo could have actually been the origin of these future hyper evolved Pokemon. So do check it out, we'll leave a link at the end of the video. But we could get a feral Mew closer to raw life, not innocent, but instinctual. And then we could get the Iron Mew, a synthetic Mew. That is basically a Mew after countless iterations in the distant future. Life reduced to its perfect function. Now guys, imagine this. Mew meets Celebi. He uses Transform to transform into Celebi, therefore inheriting, if he didn't have them already, Celebi's time travelling abilities. He could travel back into the feral era and get the feral version of Mew, or into the distant future and get the Mecha Iron version of Mew. Now guys, the last transformation takes a dark turn. What if I told you that we could potentially get a Shadow Mew? Not only have we had a Shadow Mewtwo, which was incredibly powerful, we got a Shadow Lugia, which tells us that mythical and legendary Pokemon can be caught and corrupted. Shadow Pokemon represent corrupted life energy, pain, suppression, weaponization. If Mew is life's origin, then Shadow Mew represents something terrifying. Life turned against itself. Not evil, but violated. A Shadow Mew wouldn't be about darkness, it would be about broken balance. The ancestor severed from harmony, and narratively, that's powerful. Because restoring Shadow Mew wouldn't just save a Pokemon, it would be symbolic to healing Pokemon history itself. Guys, a Shadow Pokemon made from Mew would actually be the most tragic Shadow form of all. So what type of narrative would a Shadow Mew have? Would the dastardly Team Rocket and Giovanni be involved? Or would we go the way of Gales of Darkness with Shadow Lugia? Make sure you let your thoughts be known down in the comment section, and please do smash a like on this video. If this video has got you thinking, please make sure you're subscribed with all notifications clicked on. So guys, to wrap up this video, each form represents a different philosophical idea. Mega Mew is potential realized. Gigantamax Mew is life as a myth, and he is a mythical Pokemon after all. Terastalization Mew is perfect adaptation. Paradox Past represents instinct, Paradox Future optimization, and Shadow Mew is the corruption of the origin. So why haven't we seen any of this yet in the first 9 generations? Well, I would even put out there that we won't even see it in Generation 10, or at least it's unlikely, because Mew is too foundational. He is the original mystery from Generation 1. Once you give Mew every form, it stops just being a mythical Pokemon and becomes a cosmological keystone. And Pokemon tends to save those ideas for moments when it wants to reset. But the mechanics already exist for Mew, and the lore already supports it. Just because we haven't seen it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. As we know from the Terra leak, lots of Pokemon cosmological concepts do exist, even if they've not been told in story. All that's missing really is the moment it happens. And should Mew become relevant again in any creation of the story, then I think we might see Mew get some forms. So, if Mew is truly the ancestor of all Pokemon, then maybe the biggest mystery isn't what Mew is, but what Mew hasn't become yet. Let me know what you think Mew deserves most. Which form would you like to see introduced first? And if you enjoyed this deep dive, like the video, subscribe, and until next time, take care.